To understand Mars in the 10th house, we'll first review what the 10th house symbolizes and then what Mars symbolizes. And then we'll pretty easily be able to sort out what Mars symbolizes when it's in there in the 10th house. So this is what the 10th house is. It's the middle of the sky that's right above our heads. And that one fact alone tells us everything we need to know about what it symbolizes. It symbolizes the open sky, which means it symbolizes things that are extremely visible. So by visibility, I mean this is the house of the extroverse. That means this is the house of the public. This is the house of society. This is the house of the male side of the world, the extroversive, the visible, the dominant. Because it's all about that, it's also all about fame. How visible are you? So it has to do with your career, what you're famous for, and how much status, how much respect, how much fame do you have. Thus, it's also the house of influence, power, and authority. And the open sky is about the wind and the effect of the wind too. So the 10th house has to do with movement, travel, things being pushed, things being displaced and moved. And hence it's not a stabilizing house, it's an unstable house, a destabilizing house. Now let's do a quick review of what Mars signifies. Mars is a planet of masculinity. That's the root of everything that it symbolizes. Masculinity has to do with independence and inception. So first and foremost, Mars is the planet of individuality, independence, freedom. Therefore, it symbolizes self-reliance, which is what you need to have in order to be independent. And therefore, it symbolizes strength, which is what you need to have to be self-reliant. Under the umbrella of strength, Mars symbolizes all the things that make us strong or increase our strength. So muscle, exercise, but also things like tools, weapons, technologies, machines. Mars symbolizes conflict because it's about powerful people who are independent. So it's about power that's not really cooperating, so to speak. So it results in contests, competitions, strife, warfare. Masculinity is also inceptive, which means it gets things started. So Mars signifies initiative, getting stuff started, having ambition, having motivation. In other words, passion, that's another word for motivation, right? Lusts, hungers, everything that gets something started. And also the strength that's involved with getting things started, which is better known as bravery. Mars signifies courage, confidence. And because of that, it also signifies dominance and command. The ability to have confidence in making a decision and committing to something. Now we've reviewed what Mars symbolizes and what the 10th house symbolizes. We're ready to deal with the question of what does Mars symbolize when it's in the 10th house? It's very easy to figure that out now. That's why it's worth it to do the review first. Because all you have to do is really put these two symbolic trees side by side and look for where they vibe with each other. Look for where they resonate with each other. For example, the 10th house has to do with your amount of power, right? Your influence over the world. And Mars also has to do with the same thing. We call it command, dominance. So when Mars is in the 10th house, that's how they vibe together. You have a planet of command and a house of influence. You have a planet of dominance and a house of dominance. And so that synergy between Mars and the 10th house forms the seed of the most lucid and fluent way that we can interpret Mars in the 10th house. We'll expand that seed a little bit in a moment, but right now let's look for two more seeds. The 10th house has to do with movement, so getting things moving, and Mars has to do with initiative, getting things started. So there's a synergy here between the planet that gets things started with the house that likes things to be moving. So that would be the second seed that we would need to explore to understand Mars in the 10th house. And the third one comes from the fact that the 10th house is masculine. And Mars is masculine. This is probably the most important synergy between Mars in the 10th house. So let's take a look now at these three seeds and how we would expect them to grow into interpretations. But remember, the type of soil that you plant a seed in affects the way that seed grows to a very great extent. So what we'll talk about next is the way we expect the seed to grow. But then we'll look at some actual charts that have Mars in the 10th house and talk about how the soil affected the growth of the seeds of Mars in the 10th house. So first, let's deal with this seed of the planet of dominance in the house of dominance, the planet of command in the house of influence. So this seed should grow into something like, here's a very strong leader. And what do we mean by a strong leader? We mean a person who's pretty dominant, maybe disciplinary. And now the second seed, here's the planet of initiative, getting things started, in the house of movement, things moving around. So the planet that likes to initiate movement in the house that likes movement. What do we expect from this seed? We expect a person who's moving quickly. They're at the head of their pack. They're quick, they're surprising. They're also in the lead, so that means they're appealing, people follow them, and they stimulate others to action. And now the third and possibly most important seed, here's the planet of masculinity in a masculine house. So what do we expect from this seed? It should produce somebody that's masculine in a good way. So we can say heroic. Masculine in a good way means they have good masculine traits. So it's not so much like disciplining others and constantly extroverting their force. That's immature masculinity. A good masculinity means self-discipline, self-control, and therefore they tend to get people's respect. So that's how these three seeds should probably grow. These are the interpretations that you should probably make with Mars in the 10th house. Why did we bother saying should probably? Because we don't know where you planted these seeds and how you took care of them. In other words, we don't know what chart they're in and what else is affecting them. In order to really know how Mars in the 10th house should be interpreted in a chart, you have to know that whole chart. So let's just try to play with this a little bit to give you an idea of what it means to read a chart with Mars in the 10th house. Let's talk about some people that have Mars in the 10th house. We have Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the wartime president of the United States. Very self-disciplined and got respected for self-discipline, conquering his diseases, polio and so forth, by his own strength of will and discipline. And look at this next batch of people. We have Jean-Claude Van Damme, famous martial artist in the entertainment industry. Then we have Muhammad Ali, a very famous fighter. And then we have LeBron James, a very famous athlete. You would expect this kind of person with a dominant great Mars, right? Because Mars has to do with contests, competition, fighting, strength, and so forth. Now look at these three women who have Mars in the 10th house. Angelina Jolie, Raquel Welch, and Mata Hari. Here's Angelina Jolie's chart. A very interesting thing is how her Mars in the 10th house is counterbalanced by a very juicy Venus. Why juicy Venus? Venus in Cancer. In the first house, right on the ascendant. So it's for a woman, she has enough female qualities from this Venus in Cancer. What makes it really interesting is how she also has a huge spike of male qualities coming from Mars in Aries in the 10th house. And the two of these sit good together. And it's not like she doesn't know how to operate like her biological gender. She does, as we can see from this Venus in Cancer in the ascendant. But we can see that she also is able to draw from the qualities of the opposite gender and become very brave and assertive, etc. Besides that, her Venus is her 11th lord, and it's right next to Saturn, her 8th lord, and 11 plus 8 always equals sexy, because 11 is pleasure and 8 is reproduction. And also besides that, her particular Mars in her 10th house is enjoying the best of circumstances. So not only is it in its own sign, but it's in 3 Raja yogas combinations for great success. So not only is she sexy, but she's famous. Very similar person is Raquel Welch. Here's her chart. Look what she also has. Venus in Cancer. Interesting. And that Venus is the 11th Lord in the 8th house. So again, 11 plus 8 equals not 19. It equals sexy. And look at her Mars in the 10th house. It does look a lot like Angelina Jolie's 10th house. It's mixed up with a bunch of Raja Yogas. She has 2. Then we have Mata Hari. Here's her chart. It also has Venus in Cancer. And her Mars is also looking a lot like these other 2 women in the 10th house with 2 other planets. Here you can see it's in a really good sign for it. It's in Leo with the sun. Mars likes to be in fiery environments. So in Leo and with the sun is great for Mars. And it's also in a Raja Yoga. But her Mars is combust by the sun, which is not so hard for Mars. But it does show how she's not quite the same type of person as these other 2 ladies. When she's a spy and she's involved in espionage. Let's also take a look at these 2 classic Marsy men, Jean-Claude Van Damme and Muhammad Ali, the fighters. So Jean-Claude Van Damme's chart is really cool from an astrologer's perspective of how fun it is to read this chart. Because look at his Mars in his 10th house carefully. It's debilitated. That's not supposed to be a great thing. And also look at the sun in his 1st house. It's also debilitated. But that Saturn domicile in the 4th house is carrying this chart so strongly. Saturn to Mars making mutual aspect, causing Neech Bhang Raj Yoga by mutual aspect between the 5th and the 7th lords. Saturn Sun also forms a mutual aspect. Don't forget, every planet aspects the 4th house, though not to exactly 100%, but to a very strong aspect of 75%. So the Sun is aspecting Saturn quite squarely, and Saturn has a perfect aspect to its square. It's 270 degrees square. So there's another mutual aspect of Saturn and the Sun causing another really good yoga. That yoga is a combination of 5 and 11 lords, which is great for entertainment. And the interesting thing about Van Damme that makes him different from Muhammad Ali is that he's not a fighter, he's a movie fighter. Also, he has really strong masculine houses. His 3rd and his 6th lord are the same planet as is the case for Libra, but that lord is domicile in the 3rd. So 3 and 6 strong is great for masculine things. And his moon's 3rd house is also really good. Muhammad Ali's chart is also pretty interesting. You see that his Mars in the 10th house is combined with Saturn, which makes it a combination between the 9th Lord Mars and the 7th Lord Saturn. So his Mars in the 10th house is there in a Raja Yoga. His Saturn and his Venus form a borderline mutual aspect and also do a fully formed house exchange. So they're very connected, Saturn and Venus, for Muhammad Ali. And guess what lords they are? 3 and 6, which are really important for manliness and the ability to fight. So you can see how important it is to take the seed interpretations and check the soil that they're growing in. If you want to understand the whole context of your chart, the soil in which your interpretive seeds grow, then visit my website, vicdecara.com, and click Readings. My complete chart report explains each and every nook and cranny of your chart and will keep you occupied in self-discovery for years. I also have 2 groundbreaking new reports. The first of these, Your Nakshatra, organizes your active nakshatras in order of their importance to you and presents the fundamental interpretations for the planets that occupy them. And the newest report, Star Strength, uses a system called Tarabala to unfold 90 interpretations of the nuanced relationships between all the planets in your chart, which paints a rich and detailed picture of how your various strengths cooperate or compete with each other. Order these or any of my reports and accelerate your journey to deeper self-understanding.